Um, Mr. Wickramaratne, I think you left, unlike most politicians, may I say, you left a very lucrative career behind to enter politics. You know, being the CEO of a bank at a relatively young age, you left it to join the United National Party. Now, I myself am very open. I've been a UNP supporter for my whole voting life, almost my entire voting life, so 95% of the time. The UNP always represented sort of a liberal to progressive, cosmopolitan sort of face. So when you live in Colombo and you're from Colombo like myself, it's a natural inclination to vote that way. But increasingly, it seems when you look at the election results of the last 20-25 years, it seems that the UNP may have lost that rural heartland of the country, and 85% of the country is essentially rural, and still further maybe failed to attract any portion of this nationalist segment in the country, what we call the nationalist segment, that has clearly found its appeal in the centre-left SLFP, and then to the offshoots of the SLFP with the SLPP included. So just on this, I want to ask, did the UNP lose some part of this populism or some form of populism? And within that question, I want to ask how you view economic populism, and because we just talked about reforms, isn't there a threat that the elections will always lead to some kind of populism coming up? And so I want to ask, first of all, that risk of populism, how you view this concept of populism?
Yes, clearly there is populism, and unfortunately, if you go the popular route, you may not necessarily be making the right decision and what's in the interest in the long run. So populism has always been a threat. And when you read biographies like Lee Kuan Yew and some of the others, and they compare Sri Lanka also sometimes with countries in Southeast Asia and Singapore and so forth, they clearly say, even at that stage, going back 20-30 years, they say Sri Lanka is led by populism, right? So this is where leadership comes in, and I believe that leadership is so critical in everything. Leaders are people who have figured out what should be done, and then they have to figure out how to do it. Then they have to, in the how to do it, if you are a leader, you have to convince the people who are following you to actually come that route. Often what has happened to us is, right, we call them leaders, but they are not really leaders. A lot of them have been followers. They have been looking at what's popular and populist, and they basically say, oh, this is what people want, this is what we should do, so then only they will vote for us. So really, they are followers, because they are following the people, right? And that doesn't take away from democracy, because in democracy, and a representative democracy, is we are elected, right, and people will decide between parties, between people, and say, this is the person I think is best to represent us in parliament, right? They send us to parliament. But when they send us to parliament in a representative democracy, we should be there to do the right thing. And the right thing meaning it should be, of course, ethically correct, always legally correct, for sure. But it should also then be knowledge-based, it should be experience-based, and it should have a proper goal in what we are trying to do. It may not be very popular. I mean, that's a reality. But that is what leadership is about. And so Sri Lanka has suffered from the lack of that kind of leadership. And that is why we are in the mess that we actually are. So populism, and people say, Iran, you don't understand, we have to win elections. I hear this story every day. And therefore, we should just say what people want to hear or do what people are saying should be done. I don't agree with that at all, and people keep saying that. Then they tell me, you're not a real politician, and that kind of thing. As you said, I came from a banking career, and I came into this because I was there socializing. I was there at the cocktail parties, and we generally all get together. We talk about everything that's wrong with the country, right? And then we go away, and then we are expecting someone else to change it, right, for the better. The question is, can they, will they change it for the better? And I came to the conclusion that they won't, because you have to have the people there. So it's not about me here. We need people like you, we need professionals, we need knowledgeable people, we need experienced people, and ethics and clean people, that goes without saying. But you need this. So you need education, but you also need experience. And you know you need those people in decision-making processes.
Yes.
That's in parliament, you need them in the cabinet, and you need them in the public service, you need them in the judiciary, you need them everywhere. That's the only way the country will actually change. So those people should actually come forward rather than say, this is a mess, right, we're going to leave it, but then you are leaving it to the people who can't really change it.
Do you feel that someone with your experience, given your background in the bank, that others were elevated based just on seniority and more qualified people were left out of more important cabinet positions during Yahapalanaya?
It's a bit of an embarrassing question to ask.
My apologies, sir, but I feel as a voter it was something that we felt at the time.
Yeah, so what I subsequently learned was this, that when the list had been taken to the president, the then president had questioned and said, why isn't Eran Wickramaratne actually cabinet minister? Why isn't Eran Wickramaratne, looking at finance? And this is a story I heard. But subsequently, once that government was out of office, right, just out of interest, I asked the then president, there was a story like this, did it have any truth? And he said, yes, that's the true story. I questioned it at that point in time because I felt that somebody like you, head of the country's National Development Bank, coming in, should take responsibility. But I think the consideration was what you said. The consideration was really politics. So in politics, they look at things like, seniority and, how long you've been there, and I don't know, maybe there are other things,
Patronage-based.
Maybe patronage-based, various other considerations. So that is why. So sometimes the problem I have is this. Often people ask me about the Yahapalanaya government and they ask me what was achieved, what was not achieved. And then they look at you and Harsha tells me the same thing. They look at us and think like, what have you all been doing? And they don't realize that he or I were not in the cabinet of that government. So we did what we could, being in the positions that we were, deputy ministers and subsequently state ministers, and we did what we could.